How's it going, everyone? This is Ezekiel Trezevan, Las Vegas Raiders on SI, co-beat writer Ezekiel Trezevan. As always, starting off from the top, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time. I promise to be efficient with that time. And obviously, we're here to talk all things Raiders coming out of the bye week. Obviously, Jaguars are next up for the silver and black. Going to be a tough game. Obviously, the Jaguars are a little bit better, probably a lot of bit better than what they were the last couple of years. So that's going to be a big game. Obviously, like I always say, I think, a lot of the Raiders things that they need to focus on are more about them than the other team. The Jaguars are going to be the Jaguars, the Chargers, et cetera. They're going to be who they're going to be, but the Raiders have to figure out a lot of things on their end. I think even the Raiders would agree with that. Sitting at 2-5, it's kind of hard to deny that there's some things that they need to fix. Now, in terms of what I would expect, the hard thing about this is that there are other things that you would have expected them to have done by now that have not happened. So it's hard to predict what you would expect to see happen now. But what I would expect is, in a very general sense, something has to change. Something major has to change. They have to, try something different. Now, it still probably won't work. It may not work, but what they've tried to do the first 7 games does not work. And the players, as much as they might say that they believe that they're heading in the right direction, that Chiefs game tells me that they don't believe that. The performance just says that they did not believe that. The performance told me that they did not believe in themselves. They did not believe they had a chance, and that's how that Chiefs game went so bad so quickly. The Raiders didn't think the Raiders had a chance, and that's what happened there. But the reason they didn't think they had a chance is because they keep trying the same things, and it's clearly not working. So I think with the bye week, that's the perfect time to change, or at least try to change certain things. Most notably, I don't want to say benching Geno, and I think if you come out of the bye week with Geno as your starting quarterback and you have to make a quarterback change, then you're benching him. There's no way around it. He started, you benched him. If you come out of the bye week with Kenny Pickett as the starting quarterback, there's no benching that happened with Geno. You just swapped out your starting quarterback, right? It's not a matter of Geno had a bad game and now he's sitting, or that Carroll pulled him. It's not a bad game and that's why Geno's not in there. It's, hey, we just had 2 weeks off. What better time to bring in Kenny Pickett than right now? You give him that full 2 weeks to prepare for the Jaguars, to prepare with his teammates, which he really didn't have a whole lot of time to do when they brought him in. And let's just see what you have in Kenny Pickett. Kenny's going to have, listen, the Raiders have started 6 different quarterbacks in the last 2, and let's call it 2.5 seasons if you're counting this season. 6 quarterbacks, 6 different starting quarterbacks. If you think Kenny Pickett's going to come and save the world, I've got a bridge to sell you. But it's going to at least give you a chance to do something different, give the defense the opposing defense a completely different look. No defense that the Raiders are facing for the rest of the season has seen Kenny Pickett with this Raiders team. Now is the time to make that move. And again, if you do it coming out of the bye week, you're not benching Geno Smith. You're just starting Kenny Pickett. And then that way you give Geno however long he may need to maybe see things from a different perspective and take that pressure off. I also think in a weird sense, if you throw Kenny Pickett in there and Kenny starts to struggle, then everybody can kind of start to see that and fully realize and admit that a lot of the things that the Raiders offense is going through is not specific to Geno Smith. Now, I say that knowing, and we can all agree, that Geno has a lot to fix. He does. A lot of this is on Geno, but there's no way you can watch those first 7 games and say that all of this is on Geno. Or even, I honestly think if you want to split it up, I would say at least 50-50, or maybe even at best 50-50. Geno's the quarterback. He's getting paid big money. That comes with a lot of responsibility. But when you're missing, and you can call it excuses or you can call it logistics, but when you're missing your number one receiver, you're missing your number one tight end, your number one left tackle, and you guys were struggling before you were missing any of those players, what can you reasonably expect when those players are out? And Geno and any quarterback can only do so much. It's the ultimate team game for a reason. If the line does not block, if the receivers are not open, if there's what is the quarterback supposed to do, right? And that's regardless of if it's Geno Smith or if it's whoever, Tom Brady. You throw it anywhere in between that spectrum. Quarterbacks need help. They can only do so much, and Geno needs a lot of it. Now, with that said, back to starting Kenny Pickett. Okay, again, you have the full bye week off, and then you have the week leading up to the Jaguars game to get Kenny ready. Which, small tidbit here. listen, if you're Kenny Pickett and you barely saw the field and they decide to throw you in against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road after not doing so against the Indianapolis Colts, I probably would have fumbled that snap too. So Kenny Pickett, I get it, man. I listen. It's easier said than done to go in and relieve somebody else when you probably weren't expecting it to. Now, you have to be ready. Always be ready. I get it. But I think Kenny's a little bit. I think his unpreparedness probably came from the inability to read the coaching staff, right? Like, how do you not throw Kenny in against the Indianapolis Colts in a very similar situation on the road? You're losing big versus the team that is very clearly better than you, and it's in a dome situation, right? And you're talking about the Indianapolis Colts, not the Kansas City Chiefs. For them not to throw Kenny in against the Colts, but to throw him in against the Chiefs, I can imagine Kenny probably being on the sideline, like, what is going on, right? And then you throw him in. I think a lot of people might have botched that first snap. So give Kenny 2 weeks to get fully prepared, right? To fully plan around him with the roster that you have, right? Don't put him in a blowout game minus his starting wide receiver. Like, help him out a little bit, right? Give him some time to prepare, see what you have in Kenny Pickett. That's for starters. I think that is going to be the top thing. I mean, it's the quarterback position, right? That's the top thing that they can do to give themselves a chance just to shake it up, right? Just to see what you have. Now, the flip side of that coin is if you throw Kenny Pickett in and it does not go well, then you're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. Do you let him play through it, or do you then put Geno Smith back in, and Geno's now playing from behind? And there's pros and cons to both sides, and I'm sure obviously the coaching staff, as any coaching staff, is weighing the pros and cons. But just on a very simplistic level, there's no better time to put Kenny Pickett in as a starting quarterback. Kenny's going to struggle. Kenny's going to make, I would imagine, some of the same mistakes that Geno made. He had even less time in this offense than Geno has had. There are going to be mistakes made, but you never know what could possibly go your way just because you tried to shake things up. So I think right now is the time to put Kenny in there, see what you have, and from there you have to decide: do you want to roll with the growing pains that are going to come with Kenny, or are you going to go with maybe a potential? I don't want to say a two quarterback system, but maybe you throw Kenny in there with a short leash and see what you have, and then you bring in the veteran behind him and Geno Smith, and you got to think for if you're in a weird twisted way, if Geno comes in and things are already kind of going downhill, that removes all the pressure off of Geno, right? Then at that point, he doesn't need to be in his head about making a mistake if things have already gone south with another quarterback that's going on in front of him. It might sound weird to say that, but I can assure you that I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that would probably help his mental psyche out a little bit. If Geno goes in the game and they're already down 7 points, 14 points, you can't blame Geno at that point, right? So that means he can go in there and let it loose a little bit, and that way take some of that pressure off of him and see what Geno does when he's not under the pressure that comes with the quarterback position, that comes with playing for the Raiders, that comes with that money that he got, and that comes with the pressure that he's putting on himself. Geno Smith is putting a ton of pressure on himself. It's clear as day. Everyone can see it. It's not a bad thing. He just wants to succeed. But I think if you put him in a position where that pressure is not there and it's just naturally taken off of him, I think that might go a long way for him. Now, obviously, a quarterback position change is going to be the news. That's going to be the sexy topic. And I can assure you, if they do make that coaching or that quarterback change, it's going to be portrayed as a benching for Geno Smith. That's how the media. That's what's going to happen. That is not what it is, and I think this would be the best time for them to make that move and then have a legitimate argument that this is not a benching. They wanted to give Kenny Pickett 2 weeks to prepare. That makes a lot of sense to me, more so than it being a quote unquote benching for Geno Smith. Now, with that said, next in terms of what they can do, obviously quarterback number one, huge. Offensive line, man. We've been saying this for a while. When I say we, I mean the local media, everybody that's been in tune with this team for a while. We've all noticed it. It was a very top-heavy offensive line. It's a very top-heavy roster, meaning that if any of those top guys get hurt, good luck. And a lot of those top guys got hurt in the first 4 weeks of the season. Could not draw it up any worse for the Raiders than what has happened. But with that said, you spent 2 draft picks on offensive linemen this year, and you drafted some last year as well. But those guys, in terms of those guys last year, obviously Jackson Power Johnson and DJ Glaze, those guys are already in there. So you're seeing what you have in them. They need to do something similar or consider doing something similar with Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant. Now, those guys are going to have their issues. They're rookie offensive linemen. They're going to get they're going to get beat. I mean, that's what happens with young players in the NFL at every position, especially at offensive line, especially at cornerback, defensive back. That's part of the growing pains. They're going to get beat, but that's the only way they're going to learn. And what we can establish and what has been established is that the Raiders' offensive line, as it is, it's not working. And obviously, losing Colton Miller is huge, but they were struggling even with Colton Miller in there. Uh, the Raiders know what they have in this offensive line that they've been rolling out. You can pick whoever you want to say that they need improvement there. I'm not going to do that. I think it's a unit issue. They have the individual talent, but together it's not necessarily working. And I'm honestly not sure that it's on the talent any more so than it is on the coaching of that talent. Because a lot of these guys on the offensive line we've seen under two different coaching staffs, and they were decent. They were, and at the if you want to argue that they were not decent, that's one thing. They were undoubtedly better the last two seasons under different coaching staffs than what they've been this year. That is undeniable. So I don't know if it's necessarily the talent as much as it is the coaching, but either way, it's not working. Um, and a part of this is figuring out how to make it work with what you have because Colton Miller is not walking through that door. So you have to figure out how to make it work with what you have, and that's part of football. That's part of the professional sports. That's just what the Raiders have to do. It's not it's not fun. It's not the best situation to be in, but they have to do that. Caleb Rogers, they have to throw out there just to see, what they have in them. They prepared through all of training camp with different lineups along the offensive line, the starting offensive line, pairing different players with each other, mixing in terms of the offensive line, mixing different offensive linemen here, switching their positions, and we've seen almost none of that in the regular season. I don't understand it as somebody who was at training camp at 8:30 in the morning every day for a very long time and watched them switch the offensive line regularly during training camp, mixing some starters in with some reserves, some starters in with young players along the offensive line, and then for us to talk to those offensive linemen about how they're playing different positions, and then to watch it not happen when the offensive line is struggling through 7 games. I don't know. I do not get it. But this is the time to let them go ahead and start playing a little bit more. You have nothing to lose. You're 2-5, and you have a tough stretch of games coming up. Now, what better time to go ahead and let them, you have to throw them to the wolves. It's the National Football League. Things are already kind of going south anyway. You may as well get that experience in for the offensive line for those younger guys and see what you have, and mix it up. Mix it up on the field, just like they mix it up during training camp. Now, a lot easier said than done, especially because you're learning a new offense. And to start mixing things up mid-season, I could see the difficulties in that, especially mixing it up with a lot of young players, learning a tough offense. But you got to give yourself a chance, and switching it up is the only way that they're going to do that. So, offensive line, they have to at least try something different. Offensive line, quarterback, try something different. Do I think they're going to do that? I'm not quite sure. I would lean towards probably not. I think Carroll this is a kind of an old school coaching regime, right? They're going to lean as much as Pete Carroll is wants to lean on his younger players. He can't do that and also say they're in a win now mode. They can't afford that because the younger players are not good enough to win games. So he's in between a rock and a hard place. As much as he might want to play the young players, it's it's not going to work. It's not going to work in the sense they're probably looking at it like it's not going to work because the young players can't win games and they want to win games. But you're not winning games even with the veterans that you're leaning on over the rookies and over the young players. So you may as well go ahead and let those young players get some playing time. So I think what's going on with the Raiders is you're seeing a little bit of I don't want to say a clash, but I think that's the best way to word it without making it sound worse than it is. You're kind of seeing a little bit of a old school coaching style with a new school set of players and a new school set of thinking, really on the field and off the field. And I think that's some of the issues that you're seeing. And both sides kind of have to kind of come, a little bit more to the middle. Now, offensive line, you got those young guys that you want to throw in there. Maybe not as much of maybe not as pertinent of an issue, but defensive line. You want to do the same thing with those defensive linemen. You spent again 2 draft picks on defensive linemen this past draft in Tonka Hemingway and JJ Pegues. Throw those guys in there. You need bodies at this point. You see Adam Butler, kind of, he was hurt last week. Got hurt pregame, I believe. And you saw Max kind of get hurt last against the Chiefs as well. Throw some of those young guys in there before you have to throw those guys in there, and you're in between, and you're in a bad position, right? Let those guys start getting used to it. And offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, those are the positions you can practice all you want to, but until you get out there in live speed and game speed, it's not going to really translate for you. So they need to get those guys on the field. If you're going to lose, you may as well lean further into the draft class that you just got, which by every metric, most metrics across the board, by local media, by national media, the Raiders had one of the best draft classes out there. I find it hard to believe that everybody was wrong. Local media, national media, people that like the Raiders, people that don't like the Raiders, they all said that this is one of the best draft classes in the NFL, but we've barely seen them. So that's curious to me. That makes me wonder, how can everybody be wrong? I don't know. We won't know until we see those guys on the field. So Carroll has to take the training wheels off a little bit. You got nothing to lose. Throw the Jack Beshes out there and let them play an extended amount of time. And they've been saying they're going to do it and kind of bringing those guys along slowly, but take the Band-Aid off, right? Take the training wheels off and let those guys go. Now, another thing, Darian Porter, you got to throw him to the Wolves. Throw him to the Wolves. Smart kid. He's got the physical traits, the athletic ability. But again, like I bring up, you can go down the line of the last couple of young cornerbacks the Raiders have thrown out there. They have to go out there and get beat, especially at cornerback. They have to go. Caillou Blue Kelly is going through it right now, but he needs to go through it. That's the only way cornerbacks are going to learn. And Caillou is not going through anything that previous Raider quarterbacks did not go through. DeCamry Richardson went through it last year. Ja'Cory Bennett went through it the year before. So Caillou's not going through anything that's unique to him. But the difference is that Caillou wears his emotions on the sleeve. Once he gets out of that, once he gets to having that short memory, Caillou should be fine. Either way, you need a lot more Daniel Porter to own that field. You got to just see what you got. Get used to him. You know, he's got to go get beat like Caillou's getting beat. But that's the only way they're going to learn, only way they're going to get better. So a lot of things in terms of the Raiders that they can change. I'm not sure how much that's going to translate to winning. I think overall there just has to be some honesty about where the roster is. Pete Carroll alluded to it after the Chiefs game. He said, I believe it was right after the Chiefs game. He said he didn't believe, or he didn't think that missing 3 players was going to make the team, put them in this position. Yeah, Pete, that's where the roster is, right? I think people got to be real and be honest about where the roster is. All those guys are good guys in the locker room. This is not knocking any of those guys. But if you're talking about just the NFL and you're talking about where those guys stack up, comparatively speaking, the 2-5 record is pretty accurate, right? You got to be honest about where this roster is in the grand scheme of things. And I'd also like to point out, the very last time Antonio Pierce spoke as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, he received a question that was basically along the lines of, what could have gone differently? Where can they get better? And he said, we need, and I'm using his words, basically when I say we, he said, we need better players. Go look at Antonio Pierce's last interview as a head coach of the Raiders. He said it, and it may have came across as a desperate coach, but they're 2-5 the year after Pierce is gone. You can't blame Antonio Pierce for this. He told you a year ago, almost a year ago, that you needed a better roster, and affordable, cheap signings to fix a roster that took 3 years to break down to where it is right now, 3-4 years to get to this point. An offseason of affordable spending is not going to turn things around that quickly. Obviously, the Raiders are thinking about much more than just this season. They're thinking about years in advance. But at the same time, we're talking about right now. And you just got to be honest about where the roster is and the things that need to be changed. We'll talk about it more, but they have a lot of things that need to be changed, and there's only so much that can be changed in the middle of the season. And when I say there's only so much that can be changed, it's very, very little. Because at this point, think about it. If you could change it, you would have already changed it, right? The results are what they are because there's not that many options of what they can do. So I think everybody just has to be, honest with themselves and maybe start taking a little bit more of a long-term look at this thing because I'm sure John Spytek and Pete Carroll, when they made certain decisions, they weren't thinking about just this year. And that's on top of the fact that so many things have gone wrong in terms of injuries. This team was never in a position to lose anyone, and they've lost people left and right. And the results are what they are, right? No, they're not going to win a lot of games without Brock Bowers. They're not going to win a lot of games without Colton Miller, and they're not going to lose. They're not going to win a lot of games without Jacoby out there. I mean, it speaks for itself. So, as always, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Zeke Trezevant, Las Vegas Raiders, co-beat writer on SI. Follow me on X/Twitter. My handle is EZTREZ_SI. Bye-bye.